With every match, a warrior is born. Step inside the ring. This is the Whip Podcast with your host, devastating Daryl Pace and Deshaun Whipdog Whipple.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders Podcast, aka The Whip Show. We are back. And as always, thank you guys for watching all of our other episodes and listening to them on our podcast. You know, you can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever podcasts are formed, you can listen to them. And thank you, as always, for checking out our other podcasts on the network, Railing with Mr. Joe Walker, The Coach's Corner, and everything else. But today, I have a very special guest. My guest today is the producer of the absolute best pro wrestling radio show in the world. I'm going to say it one more time. The best pro wrestling radio show in the world. From Busted Open Radio, we got producer Paul Erlick. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful right about now, man. Thank you for joining us. I know you're a busy man, so just giving me a few of your minutes, I must admit, I feel excited right now.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. It's awesome.
Appreciate that, man. Well, first and foremost, I want to tell you, one thing I really like about you, not only are you the producer of Busted Open Radio, you are a real wrestling guy. Because as you know, sometimes when people have these shows, you know, when they get a job in radio or something, they don't not necessarily like the topic. They just happen to work there. Have you always been a wrestling guy, man, ever since you was a little guy?
I think I was a fan of it in the 90s when I was growing up as a kid. And then in the Attitude Era, I was a teenager. So it was really the perfect time to be a wrestling fan. And then as I went to college, I probably got away from it a little while and then picked it back up again in the mid-2000s. So it's always been there. I don't know if I ever dreamed that this would be like a job that I've been working at for a number of years, but it definitely was always something that was like in the back of my mind.
That's what's up, man. It's always crazy how that happens. It's like you grow up loving it, then you get a little older, we get into the opposite gender or whatever, and so you kind of get away from it a little bit, but it never goes away. You still remember, damn, something comes on Monday night. It's just in your head. I like that, man.
Yeah.
So with that being said, man, how long have you been, before we talk about Busted Open, in the radio business and producing?
Well, so the radio business is new for me, honestly. Sure. It Busted Open was not the first time I've ever been in radio, but the last time I was in radio, I was in college. So it was like 15 plus years ago since I had actually worked in radio. It was more so that, you know, I had worked more on the TV side of things and worked in the wrestling business. So I was familiar with how to tell stories in the wrestling industry and like familiar with what people wanted to hear and familiar with big personalities. And then the radio part of it was like, I'm going to have to learn this on the fly a little bit more. And it took some time to learn like the ins and outs of how to be in radio. But it seems like if you know how to produce and you know how to do some editing and you know how to tell some stories, then at the end of the day, you can learn the technical aspects of things. Because outside of wrestling, I was also in some like live streaming a bit. So it was a smoother transition than I expected, even though like everybody was telling me, look, you got to really be in wrestling, or you got to really be in any job for that matter for 6 months in order to feel like you can get more comfortable on it. And there were some times where I was like, yeah, these 6 months, I need them all. But eventually you get to that point where you feel more comfortable.
For sure. I must admit, I think I was listening to the very first day when they announced that you came on was that like right before WrestleMania Dallas? I think it was around that time, man.
Yeah, it was. The timing of it was crazy because I started in the middle of March. Okay. And just a couple of weeks later, I was needed to go to the Dave Lagreca roast. And it was like the one, you know, I have plenty of experience working, you know, on the road and understanding like they had me stage managing basically for the roast. And that was great because it meant that like I got a chance to interact with Dave. He could see me counting with him back and forth on like how much, because that Lagreca roast was extremely tight in terms of like, everybody had set roles, everybody knew what their roles were. And big credit to like, Marissa Rivas, Mother Marissa, who put the whole thing together along with the whole staff. And it was like, we had to make sure that, we had our hard breaks and our set time that we could be on the air. And everybody nailed it. But it was like, hey, you're 9 days into your job. You're ready to go out on the road with us and like get thrown into the fire. And I was basically like, hell yeah, let's do it.
That's what's up, man. I love to hear that because I actually was down there in Dallas and I went to the roast. And I'm going to tell you, congratulations to you guys. Salute to you. It was seamless. I mean, for a guy that just was there for 9 days, we did not know because everything was ABC. It was definitely on point, man. But I got to admit, on the inside, were you ever a little bit nervous? Like, because I want to know, did you really realize how big Busted Open was before you became part of it?
I think there's always like that moment of like, I got to take a step back and realize it, because you realize that like Dave's got a big following. You realize that like Busted Open is the only game in town when it comes to like Sirius XM. It's practically like its own animal and its own brand. But I think it was that moment at the Lagreca roast where you could really fully take in the scope, because they sold out like the bar. It was like, I know it's like a cliche, but like they were almost literally hanging from the rafters to see Dave and to see all of the wonderful people that were working on the show. And it was like, yeah, I took a moment while I was just kind of like looking up at the crowd to be like, man, this show is a monster. And like, it's not necessarily like a pressure thing per se, but it's just like you realize like, hey, like this is big time. So make sure you're doing your best every day.
For sure, man, for sure. I mean, because I know when I was there, I was the same thing. I'm like, man, I listened on the radio before, obviously on Sirius XM, but actually being there and seeing all those people, I was like, man, I don't know how you guys do it. Well, with that being said, us as wrestling fans, you know how we are. We want content each and every day, 24/7. You guys have to do the radio. You have to do social media. How do you handle all that, man? This is so much.
Yeah, I think the best way to handle it is just piece by piece. Like, I think, organization for me is something that, doesn't always come naturally, because like, if I don't write everything down that I need to do during the course of a day, then like there's stuff that I could overlook, and I want to make sure that like I'm getting everything that I possibly can get. So it's a lot of work, but like, I think I went in with eyes open with the job. Like, hey, listen, this is wrestling. So that there's never an off season, right? Everybody knows that. And like, you also know that I'm not just watching one show, I'm watching all of them. So everything that I might miss, I got to catch up on. Anybody that I don't know, I got to learn who they are. Those are the first things before you walk into the door. And then you realize like, yeah, you got to put together the podcasts every day. And Dave and the guys do an amazing job with the Masters class, which drops every Sunday. And so like, it's 7 days a week when it comes to just doing the little things. And, obviously like I'm up for the challenge and it's great, but yeah, there's a lot to juggle, and the whole team like plays their part to do those things to make sure like, look, we're full service. You know what I mean? Like everybody knows that like Dave's basic goal for the show is that you want the show and everything that goes around it, whether it be social media, the podcast, the advertisements, everything that goes along with the show. You want us to be destination radio for wrestling. You want people to come and go, okay, some major thing happened in wrestling. I know where the first place I want to go is in the morning after. Like I want to be tuned into Busted Open Radio. And to do that, you realize like, hey, there's a lot of stuff that goes on, and it is a challenge, but it's a good challenge because it always keeps you active and driven.
That's what's up, man. And I want to go here next because I do a little radio in a local market in Toledo, but I know our producer, man, we run him ragged. I know it's so much when you're dealing with big personalities. How do you keep them wrangled enough to do what you need them to do, man?
I think, like I said, like learning how to deal with talent is something that each talent has a different personality, and you learn how to like play to their strengths and understand that like, hey, they've got their own needs. It's not just what I need. Like whatever I'm doing is for the benefit of the show, no matter what that requires. And like, I'm up for it. Like, I've got two young kids, but I'm up for, like, after they go to bed is wrestling time for me if I need to do it, because like, I love watching sports, but I can have it on in the background and focus in on everything that I need to do for the show itself in the morning. Because I'm a big believer in, like, hey, just get it all done the night before. Go to bed feeling like you're totally prepared. Then if you wake up in the morning and something breaks overnight that you missed, go check social media, make sure that you're buttoned up. Dave is the type of person that doesn't miss anything either. Like, I can't speak highly enough about Dave's work ethic. Like, the guy always wants to be getting better in the best possible way. And so, like, just make sure that everything is taken care of. And then, like I said, like, make a list of the things you need to make sure you get accomplished. And if you can knock out like more long-term stuff, then do that too. It's not easy, but it definitely, like, you start to get into the rhythm of it every single week. And then there's always curveballs, but you get into the rhythms of how to do it.
For sure, man. Now, we were just talking about talent a little bit. Now, if I recall, when you first got on the show, they were trying to give you a bit of a character, if you will. So how do you feel about that? Because normally producers are in the background, but something like Busted Open Radio, I mean, I know you because they call your name all the time. How do you feel about kind of being pushed to the forefront?
Yeah, Dave makes it pretty clear that, like, he likes the people on his show to be a big part of the show, and it's great. I had no issues with it. They asked me that when I was first interviewing with the job, like, are you comfortable talking on the air? And I told them, yes, no issues with that. You know, like, when I was a kid and I was 4 years old, I would like mute the TV and like do the play-by-play, pretending I was like the Knicks play-by-play. So like, it's something that I always wanted to do. Don't know that it always came the most natural to me. Like, you realize quickly that, like, Dave, the other staff members, obviously all the other hosts, like, they've got huge personalities. They've been doing this a long time. And then you start to feel like, oh, here's where my lane could be on the show. Like, one of the things about me is no issues being self-deprecating. So if there's a joke that's at my expense, as long as it's good for the show, then I really don't care. Like, it's whatever's best for the show. That's what I care about. So if I need to be like, I don't know, I guess, quote unquote, like a hard ass on the show or whatever they ask me to do, like, that's all just part of it. And I enjoy that a lot.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Now, I normally have another question, but since you already touched on it, why not go into one of my segments right here? It's called Book Yourself. You just said you used to mute the TV and do commentary. Paul Erlick, in 2022, if you weren't the Busted Open producer, if you could put yourself anywhere in the world of pro wrestling, would you be a commentator, wrestler, announcer? What would you do? And give me a little of a storyline too with you.
Well, definitely wouldn't be a wrestler, 100%. Like, I have too much respect and know too much about the heartaches and pains that it takes to be a wrestler. But if I could do anything within the confines of wrestling, yeah, I think that the Michael Cole role would probably be the one that I would go for. Because Michael, JR, you know, again, because I studied a little bit of the history about wrestling, like, you can go all the way back, like, from the Tony Schiavone's, Gordon Solie's. Like, I got a chance to watch stuff from like Stampede Wrestling. So you got like Ed Whalen. There's like a ton of these like unsung heroes of color commentary and play-by-play that would be an amazing job. Like that, I don't know if it's a dream job, because if I could have my absolute dream job, it probably would be doing play-by-play for like the Knicks or the Giants or something like that. But because that's when like I said, like when I was a kid, like I watched wrestling, but I didn't pretend to be like Vince or any of those guys. Okay. I just watched it. But I always pretended to be like sports play-by-play guys. But I feel like if I was going to do anything in wrestling and it was on camera, that's what it would be. It would be play-by-play.
Nice, man. Nice. Well, you know, being a wrestling historian, do you still try to, now, obviously you kind of stay up with the current product and probably some of the past, but last week we had Keith Elliott Greenberg on my show. You know, he was on Busted Open as well. We've had Brian R. Solomon, who wrote the Sheik's book. Do you still try to like read that type of stuff as well, some of the novels and some of the books to come out?
I think that I just got the book from Brian Gewirtz that I definitely want to read because like I love those kinds of stories about like the things you can't read anywhere. And there was a big time phase like as I was trying to learn as much as I could about wrestling to be as good at it as I possibly could, that I would read a lot of different wrestling books because they were available. And I would like sit down, like read a Bret Hart's book, read Eric Bischoff's book. I mean, these are going back a ways, but I was a big time wrestling reader of books. Haven't done it as much lately because there's just so much to keep up with like the current product and stuff. But what I do get a lot of times, because Dave listens to he listens to tons of different media outlets for podcasts. He reads a lot of books. Tommy Dreamer, same way. Those guys fly all the time. So whenever Tommy's flying, like he reads a lot of wrestling books, and then they fill me in like, hey, you got to check this one out. One of the things I will do though, outside of like watching the current product, is I will watch the things like the A&E biographies or Tales from the Territories, because those do give you a good sense of like the history of wrestling. I love learning about like the stories that I never knew about from like Florida, or like I said, Stampede, or whatever, AWA, like all those territories that you just don't have access to. Like I would love to dive more into Mid-South because that's really the one territory I don't have as much like full-blown knowledge. I know the talent that were there, but there's just so many great stories that haven't been uncovered that I am trying to learn with that stuff.
Man, absolutely, absolutely, man. Now, one thing I also noticed with the strength of Busted Open Radio, man, is that damn Nation's Corner is a real thing. Like the unity with the fans. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, I know they bring you guys gifts when you're in town. Like, what did you think when you first saw how serious they were about pushing the narrative forward?
Yeah, again, like I first met some members of the Nation's Corner at Dave's roast, and it was like, because everything was like I was taking it all in, I don't know if I spent like as much time as I probably should, having gotten to know all the Nation. But over these last several months, you know, when they call in, spending a little bit of time talking to them, getting to know some of the regulars that call in, seeing what they post on social media, like in the background and stuff like that. What you can tell, and again, this is such a credit to Dave, because like Dave is the type of person that it's not smoke and mirrors. The guy truly cares about his fan base. He cares that they care. And like, he is the type of person too that like will gladly give a fan like the shirt off his back, not just because it would be funny, but because like they might need it. Like he is always there for everyone. And I just, like I said, I can't say enough good things about Dave and the things that he does for the show, because it's he created it, but he always is striving for the show to get better every single day, because like he's never content. And like I said, that's in the best possible way, because it's just a credit to Dave and the people he cares about. He grew up caring about wrestling, and now that he's in a position to give back to wrestling, he does everything in his power and he uses it for good.
And I want to add to that, man, speaking of Dave Lagreca, and on a personal level, when I first got Sirius Radio, you know, obviously you tweet some guys that are in the business and someone responds, some don't, because obviously they get a ton of tweets. That man instantly told me what channel to turn to, told me to check it out. And then when I responded the very first time I listened to it, he literally asked, how did you like the show? You know what I mean? I know it might sound small to somebody, but that's a very huge thing to be able to be in direct contact with somebody that's so busy, loves the business, and you can feel that energy that he has, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are some stories out there in wrestling that I really love, and Dave is one of them. Because Dave is, honestly, he knows the pulse of the people, because he was one of the people. Like, he came from nothing. Like, he was, you know, he'll tell you himself, like, he was producing at Sirius XM for a long time, but he had a passion. He had a drive. He was like, I don't care if it doesn't work out. I got to give this thing a shot. I want my own wrestling show. And it took a while, but like, he built that thing from the ground up. And at the start of it, like, I'm sure Dave didn't care if there was 5,000 listeners or 5 listeners. He just wanted to make good wrestling content. And he always says, I want to build the bridges and not burn them. And he is that way to this. He was that way when he started, and he's that way now. Like, that's all he wants to do is have a positive community outreach for wrestling, because just like anything else, whether you like sci-fi films, superhero films, wrestling, there are times where if you are in this community that you can feel a little isolated because it's not mainstream, it's not always accepted, it's not always looked upon in the most positive light. And that's the stigma that Dave always strives to wash away, because he loves it and you love what you love. And if you love pro wrestling, then you're going to love Dave. That's his, basically, that's like his mission statement.
Amen. Listen, man, that is amazing. And literally, he said something, I think it was about a week or two on the show, almost had me in tears. He was talking to the guys that are doing podcasts like myself and everything, and he was just saying, keep going, don't stop, to where your hobby maybe will pay for it. And when he opened up and told his story of, he said he didn't get paid for Busted Open for like 8 years. You know what I mean? Literally, I was like, oh my God, that's so, like, I was almost a tears. I'm a sensitive guy, so I was. But it was amazing just for him to open up like that. I just love Dave so much, man. But
I could totally get that. And the reason that I get that is because, like, it's all genuine. Like Dave is giving you the advice, or giving any podcaster the advice, because, like, he wants to make sure that he could give back. Maybe there weren't, I don't know the exact, like, beginnings of Dave when it came to, okay, when he first started with Sirius, here were the people that gave him advice. I don't know that for sure. But what I do know is he wants to make sure that no matter big or small, what size podcast you have or wrestling related content you have, that he's giving you good advice on how to succeed, because it's, for Dave, it's about lifting everybody up, like I said. So he is, I know for a fact, I'm speaking for him, but I know for a fact that he is happy to like give out that kind of advice when people want it or need it.
that's what's up, man. That's what's up. Now, my next question to you is this. You guys have had some of the greatest stars of pro wrestling, obviously, on your show. Question number one. Now, I know Dave was just on NXT for Halloween Havoc, and I know they're starting to get an even better rapport with WWE as far as getting talent on there. Is it pretty good now getting guys that you want on the show? And number two, if you had to pick, I'm not going to say your number one interview, but you're probably top 2 or 3.
Okay, so to answer your first question, I think it's always a work in progress. Like, things, you're never going to get everybody or everything that you want, because sometimes you'll shoot for the moon, but realizing, like, hey, I'm going to take other people too. Like, I can't have Stephanie McMahon, Triple H anytime I want them on the show. But if I keep, cracking away at it, like, things will work out the way we want them. And I think we're seeing that. Like, the relationship with WWE has always been good. Certainly the relationship with AEW, Impact, NWA, basically any wrestling company, we always have a good relationship with them. So for me, it's just about persistence and making sure that, like, giving the companies enough lead time, and also understanding that there's no one guest that's going to make or break the show. So if we don't get everybody that we want, that's not the end of the world. Like, hey, we can make content whether we get guests or not, but it's just always good when we can bring on people that we like. And as far as your other part of the question, there have been a bunch, I think. I mean, number one, in terms of big names, was when we were able to bring on Shawn Michaels a couple of weeks ago. That was really cool, because, like, Dave hadn't spoken to Shawn in maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. So if you could bring on Shawn, that's a big get for the show. And it made our show feel like he says, and like I always say, like the destination radio. The term I always use is elevated content, because in order to subscribe to Sirius, you're paying for it. So if you're going to pay the money, and we appreciate that you're doing it for Fight Nation, all of our great shows that are on Fight Nation, Unlocking the Cage, MMA Today, Chris Weidman's got a show. Like, there's a ton at the fights for boxing. Like, there's a ton of great content on Fight Nation and the whole sports department. If you're going to pay that money, we need to be expected to give you the kind of elevated content that you can't get anywhere else. So when you bring on Shawn Michaels to talk about it, because he doesn't do a lot of media, then it's great. When you bring on someone like Lex Luger, and we had him on for like 35 minutes. And he was so gracious with his time and so willing to talk about like anything and everything. It was all on the table. And Dave wasn't even there for that one. And I was like, man, I'm bummed that Dave didn't get a chance to. And you know what his reaction to that was? He was like, it was great radio. Like that was all he cared about. Like I was bummed for him because Lex was someone that I don't know if he's ever had Lex on the show. I'd have to double check. But regardless, like just bringing someone like that on the show, like those are the type of things that you really like look forward to. Like we had an interview today as we taped this that I liked just because we brought in someone who was living in London and she came on for our Women of Wednesday show. Again, Dave wasn't there for the interview, but it just was one of those things where like you're bringing on people from all over the globe now. And the best part is like they want to come on. Like, right. And so, and when they come on, they know that they can expect to be treated with the kind of respect that they deserve while still being able to open up and have a free platform to talk about whatever they want. So those are probably the two ones that are off the top of my head, like that really stood out, 2 or 3 ones basically.
And that's amazing. Like I said, you guys have actually broke a lot of wrestlers as well. You know, that might have got a little bit of pub on TV or not a whole lot of shine. They come on Busted Open and they really can talk amazingly. And next thing you know, they're getting all type of bookings. They're getting more time on TV and everything. But, Paul, I got to ask you a question because now it's time for my next segment. We're going to take the producer hat off one more time. It's called the mark out moment. Now, obviously, we're not saying you're like, oh, my God, you're fangirling out. But that one moment, you're like, damn, I'm sitting here. I can't believe whether I'm in the back with somebody, I'm interviewing this person, or we're just having a beer, whatever. Paul, what was that one mark out moment you could say?
Oof, man, that's really tough because there's been like a lot of stuff over the years that have just been like those kinds of big moments. I will say for me, because I don't usually get super giddy after you've been around wrestlers for long enough, you realize that they're like professionals and people too. But I will say that like just being in the presence of The Rock, which was, I got to say that was going back to like Wrestlemania, maybe 31. So the Mania where they were in the San Francisco area, like they were at the 49ers Levi Stadium, so Santa Clara, and The Rock was there. Just being in his presence and like, I swear it was like the slightest thing where it was like a head nod towards in my general direction. There might have been 2 or 3 other people standing around me that head nod was for, but I that might have been the one moment I was like, man, that's The Rock. That just there's like when my dad was growing up, he was an usher, which is like the person like at a golf tournament where he would hold the signs like quiet please when they were like about to like hit their shot. And when he was growing up, the biggest golfer in the world at that time was Jack Nicklaus. And so he said to me, when I was ushering that tournament and Jack was in it, maybe it was just the way the sun hit the guy, but like there was a weird glow about a person who's just on a different level. Yeah. And I swear, like, at first I was like, yeah, whatever. Like, that's just being in the moment, or maybe being what, like we said, like maybe calling it a mark, whatever. But I swear that's the same case that it was with The Rock. It was like, there's just this aura. There's just an aura about certain people, and he had it.
Man, you guys heard that. He just gave it to you right there. Rocky. Oh, and speaking of that, Rocky, I heard Dave say it. I heard Mark say it. They want you on the show. Come on. If the show's coming out, it debuts this Friday. Come on the show. You got Black Adam. You got Young Rock. Go on, Bust It Open, man.
Yeah, we welcome him. If he wants to come on, the door is open. I promise.
Now, with that being said, what do you guys got coming up? I know you can't give away all your secrets, but what do you guys got coming up special with Busted Open going into the next year? Anything you can let loose?
So I'm sure there's a couple things that we'll find out about. There is one thing that I've been working on. I won't share what it is, but I'll just say that it was a request Dave made a while back to have a certain guest on the show. And if I can produce that would be pretty cool, I think, for the show. We'll see, because I don't want to guarantee it's not locked up.
Right.
But what I will say is you can expect, as we head towards the end of the year, Probably will most likely be covering like the biggest stories in wrestling, and maybe do like from the year of 2022, and maybe puts out some special content on it. If you really think about it, like 2022, I mean, it really has been one of the most groundbreaking years on the scene, like in front of the camera, behind the scenes, like in wrestling. There's so much that has gone on, and the growth of wrestling this year has been enormous. So there's a lot to choose from. Like that's the one thing that's the most difficult sometimes. It's like there's too much content that you have to pick from, and then you have to like whittle it down to the best things. So we won't struggle for content as we get towards the end of the year.
Man, it's funny you said that, because one of the guys I work with said this when I first started. He said 3 or 4 hour shows, when you think about it at first, man, that's going to be a long time. But when you got so much content and it's so good, you can do 8 hours, and it's like, man, people will still be enjoying it and gravitating to it, man.
I swear there are legitimately some times where we look up, and we're on the East Coast, so we look up, it's 11 a.m. and it's like, oh man, we got 1 hour to go. How did this show get away from us after those first 2 hours? It just flies. Like, it's not like every show is like that, but like a lot more of them are like that than you would expect, because like Dave gets along so well with the talent. They have such a great rapport with the back and forth that sometimes it's like, I got to give Dave like hey, we got to get to a commercial break. We could talk forever, and it's not a bad thing. It's like I'm engrossed in the conversation. It's like sometimes it's a little tricky to like realize that, hey man, we got so much to cover, and like, but then like, and this is the part that's always on me, is that especially like Dave knows his audience certainly better than I do, but he knows it better than anyone. So if there's a topic that takes off that is unexpected, wasn't on what we planned for, like the pivoting that Dave is able to do to make sure like, hey, I want to run with this. And then he's free to do that. And when he does, it's like, man, Dave makes the joke about it. Like sometimes I just tear up the rundown for what I had written. And like, it's true. Like, it's just like, screw it. We're going down this path. And before you know it, like the show's over. And like, we've got tons of calls, tons of interaction. And that's like it's a gift. If I were hosting the show, I don't have that kind of a gift to just go, all right, whatever, because I would want to stick to what I had. Right. But Dave, he just knows it better than anybody. He's been doing it for so long. He knows what the right way to go with these shows are.
And he definitely has his finger on the pulse of us as wrestling fans. I one time tweeted him like, man, I wish you could do a master class in how to podcast and how to like do a wrestling show, because his energy is just so amazing, man. You know, but with that being said, I want you to kind of give a quick inspiration, and I'm not going to keep you all night, but I want to give people out there, those young guys in college that want to get into radio or get into whatever they like, what kind of inspirational words would you give them?
Well, I think for starters, the biggest thing is to understand your own ways that you can get better. Be 100% honest with yourself. Lose any kind of ego that you think you have when it comes to these jobs, because the reality is that you're never going to, like, it's cliche, but you're legitimately never going to please everyone. Like, I'm sure there's tons of people out there that are displeased with a particular show that we do or whatever it is. Like, you know, not everything's going to be for everyone, but you have to be able to like understand, okay, at the end of every day, how can I get better at what I did from the day before, and write those things down. Like, always keep a running list. Like I have at all times, I keep a running list of like 2 to 3 notebooks, and they're always filled, because like, I just need to make sure like that's the way my brain works, that I need to make sure that my thoughts are on paper. Otherwise, it might be a great thought, but I'm going to lose it if I don't write it down or type it up on a Google Doc, whatever it is. So understanding that if you have great ideas, to write them down is a big one. Be honest with yourself. If you think that you can be better at something, work to be better at that thing. And then the most important thing that goes with that is, at the end of every night, realize that, all right, I can work to get myself to be better. tomorrow's a new day. And whatever I thought I could do better or like wasn't satisfied with, let it go. Because like, at least from our show's perspective, tomorrow is always another opportunity to hit a home run of a show. And like, if you're coming out of college, it's the same thing. Like when I first started, what I told you at the very beginning was that I was in college and I was doing a little bit of radio. Those shows that I was doing when I was hosting those shows I went to Temple University. So that's in Philadelphia for those who don't know. And that's a huge market, right? But my show was located in a place called Ambler, Pennsylvania, outside of Philadelphia, which I had to take a bus like an hour and a half to get there in the middle of the night. And it was listened to probably by the two people that are in this Zoom room right now. Like the audience was nothing. But like, make sure that that's a piece of advice, is just make sure that when you're doing something that you love what you're doing. And if you love it, you'll get there. You have to stick with it. And don't get discouraged if things aren't always going your way. Just strive to be better always.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing, man. Well, I know you got a lot of work to do in the morning, so I'm not going to hold you up all night. But hopefully one day I can get you back on here. We can do a part 2 or whatever. But before we get out of here, I want you to do this very last segment. It's called Ring the Bell. And what Ring the Bell is, I give you 60 seconds. You can talk about anything. You can talk about Busted Open again. You can talk about Gabby, Lagreca, Tommy, Mickie, whatever you want to talk about. Or you can just talk about what you ate this morning. I don't care. But you got 60 seconds. Paul Erlick, please ring the bell.
All right, 60 seconds. I want to take an opportunity to say thank you to the whole Busted Open community, because they have been so welcoming to me, and I expect to be that same way in return. Like everybody that calls into the show, everybody that tweets the show, everybody that listens to the show in the car or at home or on the app, it's always appreciated. Those are the things I want to get across. Like I've never been a part of something like this where it's like there's so much love in the room, and it makes it easy for me to come and do my job every morning. So just want to say thank you to everybody and let everybody know that like I look forward to getting up in the morning to make sure that everybody has the best possible experience that they can have when listening to Busted Open. And just keep watching wrestling. It's the best.
For sure, man. And I want to say this again personally. You guys are inspiration. I love listening to you every morning. Listen, if you know that I didn't even have Sirius XM radio until Busted Open. You probably hear that quite often from a lot of people, man. So thank you guys for everything you do. And definitely we'll see you guys in LA for the Busted Open party in WrestleMania next year.
You bet.
One more before we get out of here. Do you want to promote anything else right quick?
Yeah, just listen to Busted Open weekdays, 9 a.m. to noon. You can catch it on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then on Sunday, our Masters class drops. And by the way, the Masters class drops at 1 a.m. on Sunday. So if you're up, you've been out all night, let yourself listen to the best in the business talk about the Masters class at 1 a.m. Sundays, and then all day for the rest of the week.
For sure. And that Masters class is really good, guys. So if you like the Monday through Saturday show, you would definitely love the Masters class. Oh, and by the way, salute to Ryan McKinnell, too. Love that guy. Love him. He's a great dude as well.
Great dude.
Well, guys, thank you for listening in. I hope you had as much fun as I had with this, Paul. It was great having you on. You guys know what to do. Make sure you check out the Busted Open radio show. Like you said, Monday through Saturday. Listen to the Masters class. Then after that, you can listen to the Whip show. It goes together. Just 1 and 2. Just do it like that, man. But again, thank you guys as always. You know what to do. Like us, follow us, share us, 5-star us. And we will see you next time on the Wrestling Heroes and Insiders podcast, a.k.a. The Whip Show. Take care, guys.